So in for push B, kicking off the session with some rope cable crunch, well, Vulcan strap crunch. Um, so kicking off the session with the cable crunch, and then we'll be moving on to the single arm pullover, just to get everything nice and warmed up before we begin the pressing work. So get the core nice and warm and get the shoulder moving through a good amount of flexion and extension. So the goal with this, as is with any ab movement, is spinal flexion. So extend and then flex the spine. We don't want to be excessively moving our hips back and forth. This is just going to train our hip flexors and do nothing at all for our abs. Working set. So the hat is coming off. So guys, make sure you are training your abs like every other muscle, taking each set to failure or as close to as possible. It's a muscle like any other. It requires tension in order to grow. A lot of people diet down, get rid of all the body fat, and still aren't happy with how their midsection looks. And most of the time this is down to a lack of development. So make sure you train your abs hard. So another thing that I like to do before getting into my pressing work is just build a bit of a connection with my chest, especially with the first movement being a Smith incline press, so non-converging. We don't really get into that short range, so building that connection is quite difficult to do. So credit to Luke Miller for this. So hold the contraction for 5 seconds-ish, and you can literally feel it with your opposite hand, doing it single arm. Literally come out into the stretch, just the part you're about to lose the connection, and then drive it back in. And every connection, every contraction, you're trying to drive a deep burn, essentially, a strong connection with each portion of the chest. And like I said, feel that part of the chest where you're trying to drive that connection. 3 to 5 reps, and then hold the contraction, raise the arm, and you can literally trace where the tension is up into the upper chest. And then same thing again, 3 to 5 pump reps here, feeling that contraction. Doesn't have to be a heavy weight. We're not going to failure. And then reverse. You literally feel the tension go down the chest and release. And do that on the opposite side. If you're someone who really struggles, do this 2 times on each side. But I promise you, if you do this before you're pressing, it will absolutely light your chest up. So first up, we have the low incline Smith machine press, 20-degree incline, 2 sets, which we will work up to our top set weight. So when it comes to our warm-up sets, the first thing we want to take note of is we want to be treating them like our work sets. So getting just as locked in and just as focused for them. We want to be treating them like a rehearsal for the working set. It's not just a case of going through the motions and just throwing weight about because it's not our top set. And then the other thing we want to be doing in terms of the actual number of warm-ups we're doing, name dropping once again, but something I will give credit to Kyle Baxter for here. We want to take as many as necessary, but as few as possible. So we don't want to be tiring ourselves out simply doing warm-ups, but we want to make sure that we are doing an adequate amount that primes both the muscle and the CNS for our top working set. If you notice that your second set moves a lot better than your top set, or just feels a lot better, chances are you were not adequately warmed up for your first set. So bear that in mind when you are in your own sessions and take note of how your sets feel. So last warm-up set now. I am 6.5 kilos off my working weight. I'm just going to perform this for 1 rep just to acclimate my body to the load without causing an excessive amount of fatigue, and then we will get into the working set. Come on, make it light. Come on, man. Yep. So one thing you'll notice that I don't do is touch my chest with the bar. And this is because I'm pushing myself into passive range. Going to that sort of extreme range of motion, I'm no longer putting tension through the chest. I'm literally just cranking my elbows back and putting stress on my shoulders for no good reason. The chest is already maximally lengthened at the point I'm going to. It serves me no benefit to go any deeper than this. If anything, it's actually counterproductive as I'm taking tension away from where I want it. Match straps there on the back off set, but a progression taken on the top set. So overall, we are up for this exercise, which, given the fact that drugs have come down and I'm no longer in a surplus, is definitely a win. Especially when we consider that I'm probably the best part of 2 kilos lighter since last time performing this set. Definitely take that as a win. So, as any of you who will have watched the previous video will know, it was at this point we had some technical difficulties. In other words, me being an absolute rookie and somehow managing to turn off or disconnect the mic from the receiver. But either way, we have little to no audio for the rest of this session, so it is going to become a voiceover. What I was saying at this point, and following on from what I was saying on the incline Smith press, in terms of warm-ups for this movement now, as I am warmed up with it being my second press, I will not take any warm-up sets. I will literally get my working weight on the bar and jump straight in to my first working set. If for whatever reason I performed the first rep and it didn't feel quite right, my positioning was off, or the weight just felt heavy, then I would just set it down and count that single rep as a warm-up. I would then rest as normal and then go again with my first working set. Hopefully everything would then be feeling fine and I'd be in a position to perform that set to my usual high standard. I've been speaking a lot on my Instagram recently about the importance of keeping your exercise consistent for long periods of time, running them and getting better at them, progressing the weight, and not chopping and changing exercises, chasing whatever the latest fad on Instagram is. And this is just another benefit of doing that. It's a movement I've ran for a very long time now. I have my machine setup notes in my logbook. I have my working weights. So there is no messing around. I don't have to figure out my position. I don't have to figure out what weight I'm going to use. I already know. And this is what enables me to just jump straight into my working set, saving me time and energy and allowing me to get the most from my sessions, both in terms of time efficiency and performance. Set 2 now, and a final rep here that I probably should not have attempted, which you will see in just a second. I think in the midst of matching reps on the first set, I made an attempt to try and claw a progression for this exercise, which ultimately backfired, and I ended up with a partial rep, which is not what we want. It does, however, give me another opportunity to speak on the importance of the logbook, and more specifically, a paper logbook. So, with this set now, I did make note of the partial rep. I obviously didn't log it as a full rep because that would be a lie, but I did write it down as 6.5, along with a prompt to myself to not take that attempt for a 7th rep. Just as a reminder to be patient, take 6 next time, and then keep working until the 7th is there. So, pec deck up next, a short range challenge, the first one of the day.
You might be wondering why the session is structured this way, and it is because I need a lot of tricep as well as chest for my physique goals. Therefore, it would not make sense to do a pec deck first and limit the amount of load I'm able to use in my pressing movements when using a higher amount of load could benefit both my triceps and my chest development. If you are someone that solely needs chest or is struggling to build a connection with their chest, I would definitely recommend getting a short range challenge such as a pec deck in at the start of your session, along with the activation movement that I ran through at the start of the session. So, in a minute, you will see me talking about my upper arm and how it is my elbow driving across my midline that I am focusing on in these final reps. I'm not concerned with where my hands finish. My chest has no bearing on where my hands are positioned. It is simply concerned with adducting my elbow across my body towards the midline. So if I focus on driving my hands together but leave my elbows out directly to the side, then I'm leaving a lot of range of motion on the table. So when you are performing your pec fly variations, focus on what your elbows are doing and not your hands. Keep your sternum lifted and then simply focus on driving your biceps towards one another. So set 2 now, and as you can see, changing the cams from cam setting 1 to cam setting 5 to bias more of that length and range now that we have built up a level of fatigue in that shortened position. This now accommodates the resistance profile for the strength curve of the muscle, allowing us to maintain similar loading for this back offset. Essentially, what we've done is made the movement difficult where we are strong and easier where we are weak. This then enables us to maintain that posture that I spoke about before, keeping our sternum proud and not humping the weight forward into that shortened range just to complete the rep. Half time now, so for anyone who follows me on Instagram will know this is where I have my portion of EAAs. So 20 grams of EAAs going down with 200 mils of water. The rest of my intra, the carbs, they are consumed across the rest of the session to provide a steady flow of nutrients across the entirety of the training session. However, as I say, EAs they go in at half time to give me a even protein distribution between my pre and post workout meals. First tricep movement of the day now with the single arm cuffed overhead tricep extension. Getting the most bang for our buck straight out the gate with a length and bias movement. As we know from the most recent literature, targeting muscles in their stretch position is most conducive for hypertrophy based outcomes. So, this is why we're going straight in with this. It also biases more of the long head of the tricep, which, being picky, is the portion of the tricep that I need the most of, particularly in my shots where my arms are above my head or out to the side. Because my biceps are so dominant, we need to even that out with the tricep hang in those shots. So what I was saying here was how I'd taken a +2 on that first arm and how this was going to be a bit of a double-edged sword. So although I was ecstatic about taking a +2, especially on a single joint movement like this, I now had the challenge of matching it with the other arm, which of course we did end up doing. So when it comes to unilateral movements, there are two schools of thinking when it comes to evening out imbalances. Firstly, you could start with your weaker side and then take your set to failure and match the reps with your strong side. This way, you are not doing any extra reps with your stronger side and causing that imbalance to become greater. Or another method, which I personally prefer, is to go with your stronger side first and then match reps with your weak side, utilizing things like a rest pause or a self spot to get to those additional reps. This way, we are providing the extra stimulus to the weaker side, and it will catch up a lot quicker. With this way, we are also not leaving any gains on the table by simply holding back on our strong side. You do, of course, need to hold yourself accountable to training with the same intensity during these lifts as you would with any bilateral or multi joint lift. I know these movements are not as fun or as intense as your hack squat, your leg press, your deadlifts. However, I see too many people leaving effort on the table when it comes to these lifts, wondering why they are not seeing progress with them. It is only fluff work if you treat it like fluff work. If you go in and absolutely send every single one of these sets, you will see progress with your numbers, and that will translate to more muscle tissue from these lifts. As with anything in bodybuilding, though, you do need to execute an extreme amount of patience with these. You are not going to progress £5, an extra rep, an extra 2 reps every single week. And this is why that +2 I got on my first set was so notable, as this is an absolute rarity for a lift like this, especially during a prep and especially when drugs are not at the highest. So another thing we want to be paying attention to with unilateral movements is making sure that we are resting between each arm. We want to be treating each side like its own individual set, not just performing our left arm and then going straight into our right. A lot of the times, the discrepancies that people see between their left and right arms is not due to an imbalance, it's simply down to not resting between arms. Yes, your left arm may have been resting whilst you were training your right. However, there is still an element of systemic fatigue that has built up whilst training that opposite side. Delts now, and we are in with the Lion Cuff lateral raise, a variation that I've been very much enjoying as of late. So, delts for myself are a body part that I struggle to connect with massively. I found that this movement fits pretty well. I'm able to get good stimulus, a good connection with the delt. So, I've been running this on both sessions just to build familiarity with it, and also because I don't see the point in wasting time with exercises that I do not get on with when I could be doing one that I do connect with and building up that skill level with that movement. It allows a lot of freedom of motion at the shoulder joint, elbow, wrist, and as such can be a very good option for many people, being pain free and giving them an ability to output efficiently. You also have the option to alter the resistance profile based on where you position the pulleys. So the further apart the pulleys are, the more lengthened bias the movement will be. This is because the right angle between the forearm and the cable will occur at an earlier point in the lift. Conversely, if we narrow the cables, then the movement will become more challenging in the shortened range, as we will not be hitting that right angle between the forearm and cables until the top end of the lift. So, depending on where you position this movement within your session, will dictate how far apart you want to have those pulleys. Towards the start of your session, you might want them slightly narrower. Towards the back end of the session, you might want them further apart. This again goes back to what I was discussing on the pec deck to accommodate that resistance profile with the strength curve of the muscle, which of course does change as the session goes on, leaving us with a somewhat reduced ability to enter that short range as fatigue accumulates across the session. Last movement now, and finishing off with some more triceps. So, although this is a somewhat short range challenge, the way I have the cables set up here, it does create a bit more of a bias towards length and range. You may notice how I have the cables crossed over behind my back. You can note how this then lines up nicely with my upper arm. This makes it a lot more elbow friendly. Elbows are one of those joints where people typically experience a lot of niggles, and the majority of the time, this is simply down to poor alignment. You'll notice the elbow joint wants to operate somewhat like a hinge, so we don't want to be loading on the inside or the outside of this joint. The way we avoid this is by making sure that we have our cables or our machines set up in a way where the line of force travels directly through the elbow, so down the upper arm and through the elbow, as you can see here. This puts us in a nice safe position, as well as one where we have the most ability to output force from the tricep. As I mentioned, this movement, although somewhat short range challenge, it does drop off a little bit as we get there, so perfect for the end of this session. And then something that I've been holding myself accountable to doing my entire off season is finishing each and every session with a minute and 30 plank. This has helped massively when it comes to abdominal control. We don't want our stomachs being blown out as bodybuilders, so doing this in the off season is especially important. But it is a habit that I have carried on into prep because, again, I want to make sure that my midsection is nice and tight when I am on stage. And that is a wrap, guys. That is a full push B session. Thank you for anyone that made it to the end. Apologies once again for the mic issue. I'll make sure that we don't run into the same issues again next time I record a session. Until then, though, thank you for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It is appreciated, and I will speak to you in the next one.